Virtual DCs. How many of you have virtual DCs? Everybody hands up. Because everybody has virtual DCs. Okay. A couple of problems with virtual DCs. Well, one of the popular features is snapshotting, right? To make a snapshot. If you make that to a virtual DC, you can pretty much throw it out. Because it's a distributed database. Now in 2012, we enable you to create snapshots. You can snapshot your domain controllers, and you can roll back to those snapshots, and Active Directory will live with that. This all thanks to a special object called a VM generation ID, which eventually counts the generation of your virtual machine. And if something like import, export, or snapshot application applies, the generation ID changes, and the virtual machine inside knows that something has happened, and it should take special actions. This is all because Active Directory is a distributed database. Now, let me show you in action. Yeah, for the virtual DCs for this VM generation ID, two things. We can use snapshots, and we can make domain controllers clone. We can create as many dolly sheeps as we want. Right? Take one source, create a migration configuration file, and you can create 20 domain controllers out of one in a matter of like 10, 15 minutes. We won't do this in this demo. We'll just use a snapshot. Now, the idea is very, very simple. What do we always say you need to have before you install a Windows update? A backup and a rollback plan. Okay? So, yeah. Well, how many of you do it? Okay, I hit the weak spot. But now, the rollback is as simple as this. Let me show you. That's my rollback. That's it. Suppose that between the moment I hit create snapshot and between the moment I clicked apply snapshot now, I installed a Windows update, and now my server doesn't boot and it blue screens. Apply a snapshot from the past, the main controller rolls back, and it actually processes this really, really well. So we can look at the virtual machine inside. And you're going to see there's a load of messages regarding our configuration change. Somewhere around here. Active Directory Domain Services has detected a change of virtual machine generation ID. This means that we have been reverted to previous state. It does some protective actions. Previously, 2008 R2, that would result in domain control just flipping over and stop being a domain controller permanently. Now it just does a couple of actions and resumes working. Okay? Very simple, very straightforward, zero configuration. One thing you to ensure is that your hypervisor provides you a certain feature called generation counter. So if you go into Device Manager on the guest, you see here Microsoft Hyper-V generation counter. This is Hyper-V telling the guest machine of any critical changes that happen to the environment, such as snapshot reversion. We need that device to be present in order to work. You can figure this out. There's actually an internal event here. I won't go and find it now. Actually, somewhere there, which basically says I'm running on a supported hypervisor. You need to make sure that your hypervisor is supported, that it provides you with this generation counter in order to make this functionality work. Okay? But otherwise, it's very easy for your patch management. This is one of the coolest uses I see for the domain controller snapshot, rolling back if something goes wrong. Your database will remain at the state at which it was. So if you accidentally delete 5,000 users and then roll back to its previous snapshot, that won't help. Your database is still messed up. However, if you accidentally removed a couple of very important files, yes, your snapshot works there. So it works for the OS, but not for the Active Directory database. Cloning, I'll explain it on a slide because we're a little bit out of time. Now, what you do, a couple of steps you need to do. You take a source DC, which you're going to be using as a master copy for your clone operation. You add it to a group called clonable domain controllers. You actually have a group in Active Directory called clonable domain controllers. You add that DC to a group. Then you create a config file. A config file states what is going to be the configuration of the new DC. So once you've completed the cloning, you know, you like split a DC in two halves. There's the old part of it, and there's the new one. So the old one keeps all of the previous configuration that it has, but what about the new one? What IP address is it going to take? What subnet mask? What DNS? What name? What site? Etc. And all of that is configured in the config file. So you create that config file, and then basically you shut down the source, export the machine, rename it, import it again, power on. And now you have two machines. The previous source that you've exported, and then the new one that you've re-imported. And then one is going to stay how it was. The second was going to take the information from the config file and create a new DC. And you can repeat that process by just using the same source and just supplying 50, 100 configuration files. And that way you can rebuild your forest in a matter of, what, 30 minutes. By just scripting a little bit PowerShell, starting up a lot of DCs with various configuration files inside them. You can use native VHDX mounting that was demonstrated previously to facilitate that. This is the virtual DCs bit.